Hey everyone, and welcome to today's Explainer. We're about to take a super fascinating journey right into the absolute core of how we learn, how we focus, and how we actually physically change our minds. We live in this modern world where screens are just everywhere, right? They're constantly pulling our attention in a million different directions. But this isn't just about losing an hour here or there scrolling through social media. There is a hidden biological cost to all of this. That constant digital bombardment is secretly locking our adult brains in place, literally stripping away our natural ability to adapt, learn, and grow.
Okay, let's dive into this because the actual numbers are just staggering. According to research by productivity expert Chris Bailey, 40 seconds is the agonizingly short amount of time we actually focus on a computer screen before we switch tasks. 40 seconds. And get this, if you have a communication app like Slack open, that drops down to 35 seconds. We're just bouncing from screen to screen, tab to tab, constantly shifting gears before our brains can ever truly lock in. So why is this happening? Well, it turns out it's not simply that we're easily distracted. It's that our brains are fundamentally overstimulated. Our smartphones, our apps, they're perfectly engineered to hijack this mechanism in our minds called the novelty bias. Basically, whenever we seek out and find a new text, a fresh email, or just a tiny nugget of social media drama, our brain rewards us with a hit of dopamine. It's hardwiring us to literally crave digital distraction over deep work. We're just constantly hunting for that next chemical hit.
All right, moving to section 1, the stakes, neuroplasticity and the aging brain.
So why does all of this matter so much? It really comes down to the biological stakes of this whole distraction epidemic, which is neuroplasticity. Now, neuroplasticity is just your brain and nervous system's ability to change itself in response to your experiences. By constantly fragmenting our attention, we are losing our ability to actively engage this incredible superpower. Just look at the stark contrast in how our brains age here. From birth until about age 25, the human brain is basically a passive plasticity machine. We're born with this wildly connected web of neurons, and as kids, we pick up languages, motor skills, social cues, just by existing and taking in the world. But look at what happens after age 25. That passive window slams shut. The brain's environment actually thickens, making it way harder to alter those connections. To rewire your neural pathways as an adult, you have to clear a very specific biological hurdle. Active, deliberate focus is absolutely required. Dr. Andrew Huberman, a neurobiology professor over at Stanford, puts it perfectly. He says, the young brain does the work for you, but as an adult, you have to engage entirely different processes. The stakes here are huge, guys. If we let our phones continually shatter our focus, our adult brains become physically incapable of learning new skills, processing traumas, or just adapting to whatever life throws our way. Which brings us to section 2, unlocking the gate, the chemistry of change. So how do we fix this? How do we break through all that noise? We have to look at the scientific deconstruction of what it actually takes to open the gate of adult neuroplasticity. We can't just cross our fingers and decide to change our brains. We have to change our internal chemical state first. Think of this as the exact biological recipe required for adult neuroplasticity. It's a very specific sequence. Step 1 is alertness, driven by the chemical epinephrine. Step 2 is spotlight attention, driven by acetylcholine. And step 3 is deep rest, specifically sleep. When you combine these 3 exact ingredients, incredible studies show that your nervous system doesn't just have the potential to change, it absolutely has to change. Let's break these down a bit. Step 1 is epinephrine, which you probably know better as adrenaline. Released right from a region in your brainstem, it essentially acts as a massive, nonspecific alarm clock. It hoses the entire brain down, waking everything up. Now, you can get this through a great night's sleep, a strong cup of coffee, or even just sheer psychological motivation, like the fear of failing a test or a deep love for a project you're building. The cool thing is, the brain doesn't actually care if the motivation is positive or negative. It just needs you to be alert. Because without alertness, there is absolutely zero neuroplasticity. And this brilliantly illustrates the second part of our waking equation, acetylcholine. While epinephrine wakes the whole brain up, acetylcholine acts as a spotlight. It highlights only the specific neural circuits we want to change. Imagine you're in a super crowded, noisy room. Acetylcholine is the thing that amplifies one single voice so you can hear it perfectly over all that background noise. It marks those specific active neurons, essentially saying, hey, this right here, this is the exact connection we need to strengthen. All right, let's look at section 3, mastering focus, behaviors and boredom. Okay, so knowing the chemistry is great, but how do we naturally trigger these focus chemicals in a world that is literally designed to distract us? We need some actionable behavioral protocols. And one of the best ways to reclaim your attention is to aggressively lower your baseline of stimulation. Chris Bailey did this wild experiment where he forced himself to be intensely bored for an hour a day for an entire month just to detox his dopamine system. Look at this list. He read the iTunes terms and conditions for an hour. He intentionally waited on hold with airline baggage claim. He counted zeros and the digits of pi. The guy literally sat there and watched a clock tick.
I mean, it sounds like absolute torture, right? But after about 8 days, his brain actually adjusted to this much lower level of stimulation. And the result? His attention span massively expanded. Plus, as J.R.R. Tolkien famously said, not all those who wander are lost. By embracing the boredom and turning down that constant hyperstimulation, Bailey found that his mind started to naturally wander again. And that wandering is critical. That's exactly where our brains connect the dots, generate fresh ideas, and build out plans for our future.
Lowering distractions is awesome, but when you finally sit down at your desk and you absolutely need to turn on that acetylcholine spotlight, how do you actually do it? Well, here is a fundamental biological truth. Mental focus follows visual focus. Your brain's cognitive attention system is physically anchored directly to your visual system. So, knowing this incredible biological link, how can you actively use your eyes to trigger mental focus right before you start reading a dense textbook or tackling that complicated report for work? It's actually a super simple physical action. You just stare at a specific narrow visual target for 60 to 120 seconds. If you're about to work on your laptop, literally just stare at a tiny spot on the screen. Hold your gaze there and try to blink a little less than normal. This causes your eyes to turn inwards slightly, converging on a single point. This physical action dramatically shrinks your visual window, and by doing that, it acts like a mechanical switch in your brainstem, directly triggering the release of both epinephrine and acetylcholine. You literally use your eyes to turn on the neuroplasticity spotlight. How cool is that? This leads us to our final part, Section 4, the secret ingredient, the power of rest.
So, the crucial point is we've built the alertness, we've built the focus, but here's the twist. The focus we just built is only the trigger. It's not the actual rewiring event. Neuroplasticity does not occur during wakefulness. It occurs during sleep. All of that intense focus, the mental agitation you feel when you're trying really hard to concentrate, the acetylcholine highlighting those circuits, that is just marking the territory. The physical strengthening of the synapses, the actual structural change inside your brain only happens when you are deeply resting. You can really think of it as a two-part system. On the left side, you've got our waking state. Our brains naturally work best in roughly 90-minute focus bouts. That's when you eliminate the distractions, stare at your visual target, and push through that initial agitation to mark the synapses. And then, you stop. Because on the right side, deep sleep and rest take over. While you're sleeping, those circuits that you highlighted are strengthened and made permanent, and the ones you don't need anymore are pruned away. But what if you don't get a perfect night's sleep? Well, science offers us a pretty incredible hack called NSDR, or non-sleep deep rest. Studies have shown that if you take a 20-minute shallow nap, just lying down with your eyes closed and zero sensory input right after a 90-minute intense learning bout, you can actually accelerate the learning process. It lets you bypass some of the need for deep sleep, rapidly locking in that rewiring. Or honestly, even just taking a walk where you let your mind wander mindlessly can trigger this essential rest phase. We've covered a massive amount of groundbreaking science today. The truth is, we are all born with a right to neuroplasticity, but as adults, we really have to earn it. We have to fight the novelty bias of our phones. We have to master our visual attention to trigger that acetylcholine, and we have to protect our deep sleep. So I want to leave you with this provocative thought to ponder today. When you sit down to work, are you deliberately giving your brain the precise biological focus it needs to grow and change, or are you just feeding it the digital distraction it constantly craves? The choice and the chemistry is entirely in your hands. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer.